Slave, Part 2. The man stared out from the light into the darkest dark he had ever seen. Looking behind him, everything was normal. For him and for his fellow Israelites, the sun rose, shone, and set. Stars appeared. He could see the moon. But looking forward towards Egypt, it was black. He could not see the palace, the statues, the buildings. Even at night, there was a difference between the land of Goshen and the land of Egypt. This was bizarre. The last couple of weeks had been bizarre. The man had seen an infestation of frogs, gnats, flies, and locusts. He had seen Egyptians covered with boils, their livestock struck dead, a terrible storm of thunder and hail. But through it all, the man and his people had been kept safe, set apart. And there was no explanation, not really, at least not one that had convinced Pharaoh. The man turned away from the blackness and slid down the wall. How strange it was to have so many days of rest. His body was not used to it. He leaned his head against the cool rock behind him, closing his eyes. From outside, he could hear the elated voices of his people, chattering with excitement. A newness had become palatable among the Israelites, like hope, almost personified in their midst. It could be felt in the sunshine, seen in his people's clear skin and the health of their animals when compared to Egypt. It became a flicker in each person's eye, an authentic presence in their smiles, an unspoken warmth that unified the people and strengthened them. There was a pride in their community that had been absent, a rightness. Because along with this hope, the Israelites were experiencing justice, no longer overlooked and forgotten, protected and worth fighting for. All the Egyptians had caused them to feel, born to be nothing more than slaves, easy to overpower, small and weak. It was being challenged by God himself. And that was affecting the identity of the entire nation. The man saw all of this, and yet for him, and he knew for some others, hope was a risky thing that kept him from fully giving himself to this new identity. Though he really could feel some healing taking place within, the process was slow, and he feared it would abruptly cease. And he knew he wasn't the only one. From his doorway, he saw a group of young men walk by, shaking their fists at Egypt and shouting in victory, literally singing the praises of their God against the false Egyptian gods who were doing nothing. But he saw others glance towards Egypt in fear. They were witnessing firsthand the power of their God. Thankfully, it was being directed at their enemy, but for some, justice was hard to observe. There was that flicker of doubt, wondering if they were truly safe from this power that could create such darkness, turn water into blood, and cover an entire city in flies. Filled with a holy fear, they stared out at Egypt and wondered what would come next. Still others, he noticed, were simply conflicted and confused. And this was where the man found himself. He was convinced, now more than ever, that his God was real. His God was fighting for his people. Something big was happening, and yet, what actually was happening? Because based on the rumors, despite the number of audiences Moses had, Pharaoh still would not let the people go free. And so far, none of the plagues had changed his mind. So yes, God was at work, undeniable. But what good was it if Pharaoh remained unconvinced? And And so the man felt unsettled. He'd lived too long in the status quo to hope. Soon enough, his restless muscles brought him out of his thoughts. As much as he had craved rest, his body was too used to activity to stay sitting still for long. The old man pulled himself up and leaned his hunched frame against the window ledge. As he stared out into the darkness before him, he looked down and saw two figures emerge from the town and head towards Egypt, watched as they lit torches to make their way through the dark. Moses and Aaron. Apparently they had been summoned for an audience with Pharaoh again. The man didn't know them personally, but the Israelites talked of little else. What pressure to be hand-chosen by God, to represent him to Pharaoh. How discouraging each meeting must be, always the same answer. The man leaned forward as Moses and Aaron reached the edge of the darkness, curious what would happen. As soon as they crossed over into Egypt, their flames mysteriously blew out. No light could penetrate the depth of that darkness. He saw them hesitate, but then press on with their arms extended, blindly navigating their way to the palace. He watched until he could no longer see their frames in the dark. It didn't take long. And the man, not really knowing what to think, simply stood at his window, attempting to balance the complexity of hope and doubt in his mind.